In episode 120 of the Golf Rules Questions podcast, Stuart chats with Graeme Scott, who has extensive experience in professional golf, including at the highest levels, refereeing at 15 majors and at tournaments all around the world. Scotty regales many of his experiences with players at various tournaments and talks about what it takes to be a good referee. Stuart then finishes the podcast with the latest GRQOTW.
You see referee David Blake there. He's obviously talking to one of the rules officials up by the green.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Golf Rules Questions podcast. This is episode number 120. My name is Stuart McPhee and thank you very much for tuning in wherever you are in the world listening into our podcast, and thank you for your ongoing support. Episode 120 here today. I'm really excited. I have another guest that I'm interviewing today here for you. And why I'm really excited about this chat is this man has an extraordinary amount of experience in golf at the highest levels as tournament director and referee and the like, working across all majors. He's done around 15 majors, including all four major tournaments. He's one of the very few people in the world who has done an R&A level 4 course. He's a man with an incredible amount of experience, and I'm really excited to talk to him today, and hopefully he can share some of his stories and some of his experience. Before we get to that, of course, we need to answer the GRQOTW from episode 119, and the GRQOTW from that episode goes as follows. Blakey and Stuart are playing in a match in the Koala Cup at Wombat Hills. Blakey makes a putt on the 18th hole to win the match. Blakey and Stuart shake hands, and Stuart says, "Congratulations." As they are beside the 18th green, attending to their clubs, a spectator walks very briskly from the clubhouse and tells Stuart that Blakey forgot to replace his ball marker in the correct spot after he moved it on the putting green. Blakey and Stuart cannot remember, but they do agree to play extra holes to determine the winner. Stuart wins on the 20th hole. What is the official result of the match and why? Well, there's a few things to have a look at in this particular question. The first one we'll do is when the result of the match is final, and that's in 3.2A5. So the result of a match becomes final in the way stated by the committee, which should be set out in the terms of the competition, such as when the result is recorded on an official scoreboard or an other identified place, or when the result is reported to a person identified by the committee. Given the information in the question, it's fair to assume the result of this match has not been made final. They are literally moments, having just finished the 18th hole, standing by the green, attending to their clubs. The result of this match is not final yet, so it's still alive, so to speak. The other thing we can look at is agreeing to a wrong match score. So let's say Blakey didn't play from a wrong place and didn't lose the 18th hole. They've come to an agreement as a player and opponent can at any time during the course of their match agree on the match score. And of course, it's one of the responsibilities of the player and opponent to know the match score. We don't have scorecards in match play. And it says this in the rules: the players are expected to know the match score, that is, whether one of them leads by a certain number of holes or the match is tied. If the players mistakenly agree on a wrong match score, they may correct that match score before either player makes a stroke to begin another hole, or for the final hole before the result of the match is final. If not corrected in that time, that wrong match score becomes the actual match score. So let's say Blakey didn't play from a wrong place and he actually won the match. The result is not final yet, but they've come to an agreement that no, the match is still tied. We need to play extra holes. Stuart would have won the 18th hole based on that understanding. As soon as he teed off on the first hole or the 19th hole of their match, that score became the score, and that is the match was tied. So even if it was a wrong match score, it became the actual match score as soon as they teed off. One thing I will also say is about concessions. So at the end of the match, the end of the 18th hole, Stuart said congratulations and shook his hands. And the guidance we've received is that does not constitute a concession. That is not conceding the match. So in that particular case, Stuart didn't concede the match by shaking hands and saying congratulations. It's not officially a concession. Well, that's the GRQOTW for episode 119. And as always, thank you for those who submit their answers in an attempt to answer that situation and that ruling correctly. Well, as I said, I'm thrilled today to have another guest for episode 120 of the Golf Rules Questions podcast. Today, my guest is Mr. Graeme Scott. Scotty, welcome to the Golf Rules Questions podcast. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Stuart. Glad to be here.
No, it's absolutely our pleasure. A man of your experience and how many tournaments you've worked at over many, many years. For those
come on, I'm not that old. Stuart. Come on.
You started very young. For those who do not know you, and we do have an audience which we're very lucky to is far and wide. It's not restricted to Australia. We have lots of people around the world listening to us who are very interested in the rules and do officiate at various levels, whether it be amateur and professional. Would you mind just taking a few minutes and tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, I mean, really my involvement in the rules, if I start from the beginning and bring you to the present, I joined New Zealand Golf back in 1997, basically as a programs manager, it was termed at the time. And I had no real rules experience going into that job, but the CEO of New Zealand Golf at the time gave me that portfolio to look after rules in New Zealand. And my first task was to sort of unify all the districts within the country. It was a strange situation whereby each of I think there may have been 26 districts at the time, maybe 18, but they all set up their own rules exam, and the candidates, if they passed, received a national award, which didn't seem quite right. So I was given the task of creating a new national rule system in New Zealand. And so we commenced with that, but obviously I had to get qualified myself. So that was the first task, was to get myself a rules qualification, and then set about establishing the new 3-tier rules program in New Zealand, and that came in 1998. I mean, basically there was nowhere really for me to go at that stage. I was writing exams and that sort of thing, so I couldn't actually sit any further exams in New Zealand myself. So I actually went to the R&A rules school in St Andrews in 2003. I was very lucky. I had an extremely supportive board and CEO at that time at New Zealand Golf. And it was a little bit two-sided of the coin, because one, I wanted to get a qualification, but also I wanted to see how they established their national school, if you like. So I went along, I did that one and set up a national school in New Zealand. And so I guess I became known a little bit then by the R&A. They came out to New Zealand and I did some work with them in New Zealand, and got invited to do my first Open in 2004 at this year's venue at Royal Troon. And so gradually my role at tournaments increased. I worked quite a bit with the PGA Tour of Australasia and Andrew Langford Jones. And so again, I could see an avenue there, not so much a personal avenue, but for New Zealand Golf. So I approached again New Zealand Golf and said, look, I'd like to go and do some tournaments in Australia, learn more about the professional games, see what we can introduce to our tournaments here in New Zealand. So as I say, very lucky. I came and used to do maybe 6 tournaments a year in Australia for the PGA Tour of Australasia. And that continued on. I ended up doing 5 majors during that period, 5 Open Championships up until 2009, and also served on the R&A Rules of Golf Committee during that time as well. Moved to Australia. I was sort of headhunted, I guess, and approached by the tour to come to Australia and work for them, but not as a rules official. It was to be tournament director at tournaments and do other roles as well. So I think that I'll probably touch on this later, but that's the thing with it. It's very difficult just to be a rules official. There's no pathway just for a rules official, if you like. So I joined the tour in 2010. and have been very fortunate up till now. I think I've done 15 majors and other big tournaments. So very fortunate. Worked with some exceptional rules officials around the world, learned a great deal from them. And currently taking a little bit of a step back, moved back to New Zealand, and more of a senior tour official now. So rather than working every day for the PGA, I focus purely on tournaments.
Well, Scotty, thank you for that and sharing a little bit more about yourself and the background. Is it fair to say, though, that the interest in the rules, the spark initially was more of a job function rather than you being a social golfer? No, I really need to know more about the rules.
That's definitely it. And I think with a lot of organizations, it comes as a sort of a prerequisite if you're working in tournament golf. Excuse me, whether it's tour level or governing body level, it's only part of your role. So I don't think it's, wow, I've got this fascination to just do rules. You start doing rules, and it just becomes of a part of you in what you do and part of your job. And sometimes it becomes a bigger part of your job, and sometimes it's you qualify, you can do tournaments, and you assist at tournaments if you're working for an organization. But yeah, you're right. That I think a lot of people get an interest in the rules, but that's really what it is. It's more a self-interest in that they know what they're doing out on the course, or to tell the playing partners that they've just lost a $10 bet because they did something wrong on that last hole.
You know, you probably won't remember this, but the very first time we met and the very first tournament, I want to talk about this a little bit later, the first tournament, you and I worked together. You made a very interesting comment about being a rules official and knowing the rules and being a referee. And that's what I want to talk a bit about today is that, you know, I've got the official guide here, 500 plus pages. It doesn't talk a lot about being a referee. It talks about, you know, Rule 7 and 7.1 and the like, but not about that on course and that interaction with the players. And that's certainly what I think, what I want to talk about today, because someone of your experience, you know, how is this knowledge passed on? How is that experience and information passed on? I
mean, I joke about this sometimes. I mean, there's people out there that we used to refer to as boffins. There's a lot of boffins out there that can recite the rule book. And as an example, I was talking to one of my colleagues overseas a little while ago, and they had advertised for a rules official, and they interviewed this person, and they basically said to them, if you want, I can tell you how many full stops there are on page whatever. And that was it. The job was gone at that point, because I mean, from a player's perspective, there's one thing that you never ever do with a player is start quoting rule numbers. So you get called to a situation. I mean, basically, the player just wants to know, do I get a drop?
Yeah.
Do I not get a drop? If I do, where do I go? Or what are my options? They're the things they want to know. If you say you've got no option, well, I'm afraid there's no relief under the rules or under our local rules. You're just going to have to play it as it lies. That's when the situation can get a bit titchy, and really you've got to talk them through it as to why they're not entitled to relief, because they'll start trying to come up with different scenarios and whatever as well.
Back at the start of my journey, I think the first tip I was ever told was don't mention rule numbers to players. They could not have any less interest.
And it's true. It's funny, when I started at New Zealand Golf way back in the last century, the thing to do, I was told before I sort of graduated up the ladder a wee bit, that when you approach the player, the first thing to do was to ask them which rule they were seeking relief under. And the reason was that most of the people refereeing had no idea on how to rule. And so if the player couldn't come up with what they wanted relief under, they just didn't get relief.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, that's going back into the dark ages.
Wow.
That was when we rode up. That was when we rode up to rulings on horseback.
Oh, that's not true. So I wonder if that actually happened ever in the history of this game. I hope. Anyway, who knows?
I would love to do that. I would love. It's one of my fantasies. I'd love to referee on horseback. I do like horses. I just think it would be quite funny.
Imagine riding to the nearest tree and wrapping the strap around the tree so the horse doesn't go anywhere, and then walking over to the ball with your horse.
It's not quite that, but when we did the first Fiji International a few years back, our CEO at the time had this vision that we were all gonna referee in lavas and sandals just to fit in with the local culture. That didn't happen either.
Okay, that would have been good to see. You mentioned about 15 majors. You mentioned about doing the Open Championship. So there's this, incredible number of, tournaments you've done, a lot of experience. Obviously, you've had your fair share of players and some very big names in the game. And again, there's nothing in the rule book about being a great official and being a great referee and dealing with players. Do you have any stories you'd like to share about some of the things that have really brought out the importance of how you interact with a player and dealing with, and possibly an awkward situation, with a player?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I tell this story to people, the first one. It doesn't make me look particularly great, but I do tell it to aspiring officials or my colleagues, because it shows the importance of how you talk to a player and the words that you use. And this ruling changed how I referee completely. And what I like to do in my sort of mentoring role with other officials, it's taken me 27 years to get to this point. So it's not just learning the rules. 27 years now I've been doing this. If I can short circuit your learning process and cut that down by giving you examples and telling you what works and what doesn't, then it saves you a heck of a lot of time down the journey. So back to this ruling, and it was at Huntingdale. It was the Australian Masters, and I think it was around about 2005, something like that. And it was the final round. I was out on course. I was still working for New Zealand Golf, but I was guesting over at the tournament. And final day, final round, final group teeing off. And in the final groups, a fairly young Stephen Bowditch, who I'd known since he was about 15, 16, coming to play in junior teams in New Zealand. And I was positioned down past the first hole somewhere, and I got a call on the radio, or whoever's down near one, be ready. You might have a ruling, a ball gone very close to the boundary fence out on the right. So fine. So I drove down my cart. I'm probably 20 meters away from the ball. I didn't want to get close to it because I'm sure the player would have called for me if he needed some help. I did see what happened. It was close to the boundary. There was a whole trail of TV cables close to the fence, and the ball was lodged between the cables. Now, it wasn't on the cables, so it was fine. It was on the ground, so it was a simple situation, but it had a cable on either side of it. And so the player came up, and it was Stephen Bowditch, and he was sort of blowing steam, even though it was his first hole. He was sort of leading the tournament or close to it. And he called me over. I said, so what do we do here? And we both sort of crouched down. I can remember as clear as day. We both sort of crouched down. And I said, well, there's not a problem, Stephen. They're movable obstructions. We're going to move them. But I want you to mark the ball, and then we'll move the cables. The words had no sooner come out of my mouth, and a tee suddenly appeared in his hand. He put it down beside the ball and lifted it. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, you said to mark it. And I said, no, I said to mark the ball. And he says, yeah, that means pick it up. And I'm like, no, let's mark. We're going to move the cables. It's so if the ball moves, you're going to put it back. I said, and so he said, so what's the story? And I said, well, I think you're looking at a one-shot penalty for moving your ball. Well, I was sort of unaware at the time of some of the issues that Stephen had been having at the time, and it's all very well documented that he suffered from depression, etc. And actually he promoted Beyond Blue sort of from that point on. But all hell sort of broke loose. Of course, the TV cameras were there. It was the final group of the day, and he got up and he was cursing, and the next thing the glove came off and it got thrown at his bag. And as I say, it was 2005. So although I'd done all of the rules qualifications, I was still relatively new to the experience side of things. And anyway, I said, look, I'll call for another opinion, which we did. And even now, the decision there, or interpretation, whereby if the player misinterprets your instructions, then there's no penalty. So, but from that point on, I learned a couple of things there, and one's about player management and one's about how to talk to players. I realized pretty quickly that the words had come out the wrong way when I was trying to talk to him. And so the first thing that I always say to a player now in that sort of release situation is, let's leave the ball where it is, but put a tee beside it so we know where to put it back if it moves. So nothing about marking the ball. It's using simple speak, but leave the ball where it is. That's the key point. And so I always say that to referees now, because and when I've been to other TARs, etc., it is a way that the RNA promote now as well, is leave the ball where it is. We'll put a tee in so that we know where to put it back if it moves. So that was one thing. The second thing was, I walked away from the situation, and I knew that I was going to see Stephen at another time or whatever down the track. So I didn't want it to be left at that sort of animosity level. So what I actually did was I spoke to Langers at the time. I said, look, I don't like how that finished up. Stephen's manager was blowing up as well. So what I actually arranged was I went and waited at the scorecard return when he finished his round. And when he came out, I went and saw him and said, look, Stephen, I'd just like to apologize for the way things sort of happened out there and whatever. And I said, I'm sorry that you know, you got frustrated and whatever. And he also apologized that he shouldn't have blown up the way he did, etc. And so that was resolved from that point. It was never ever mentioned between us again after that, and our relationship was really good after that. So it's what we've got to remember is we're all humans. We're just doing our job. And so I used to be a school teacher, so I used to have this philosophy that never carry over arguments or whatever you'd had with kids from the day before into the next day, or you would just never enjoy your job. So it's the same sort of thing when you're refereeing. Address every day as a new day. Well, so there's that one. Yeah. And the second one was probably just as public. It actually featured on USA Today, the newspaper, on the front page, and was described as Antgate. And it was the 2015 USPGA Championship at Whistling Straits. Great tournament for Australia, and that Jason Day won, and I was lucky to be there for that. But I was on the fifth hole, par 5, and a long hole with a sort of a bit of a dog leg, and there's water involved, etc. And I'm down by the green, and we didn't have carts or anything, because with the USPGA, you get given a hole, you get 2 holes to work during the week. First hole one day, second hole, then you go back. So I'm down by the 5th green, and 2 of the players come walking down. And they said, I think you're going to have to go back. Bubba wants a ruling. And I'm like, okay. So I've got no golf cart or anything. So I've got a player at drive length, 2 players at the green. So I just run. So I run back down the fairway, and sure enough, I get down there, and here's Bubba Watson. And there are little anthills on the course, and his ball is sitting on the cone. So if you think of the cone of a little anthill, his ball's perched on the top of it. And he said, I want relief from this anthill. And of course, once again, the cameras are there and whatever. I want relief from this anthill. And I've said, I'm sorry, there's no relief. It's a loose impediment. It's not, there's no relief from it. It's not an abnormal condition. So it went on. And he said, yes, it is. It's a tunneling animal. And I'm like, well, it's not a tunneling animal. It's not an animal. So you're not entitled to relief. Yes, I am, whatever. So I said, look, I'll tell you what I'll do. Let's call one of the rovers and just see if anybody else has received relief from this situation this week. So it's just confirming, it's not, they don't get relief, but it's getting confirmation from someone else. So I called John Paramore and said, John, are we giving relief from anthills this week? And John sort of went through, started going off, just, no, an anthill is elusive.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, John.
I know that.
That's all. I just wanted confirmation that no one else has been given relief for this week. So I passed this on to Bubba, and then he said, you guys just don't care. I'm allergic to insect bites. You guys just don't care. You guys don't care about our well-being. And so it's then you got to sort of say, well, yes, we do care about your well-being, but these ants haven't been deemed dangerous. They're not fire ants. They're small ants. So I'm afraid there's no relief. And anyway, that was it. And at that point, you've really just got to walk away because you'll just keep going on and on. But yeah, sure enough, I think there's still a video somewhere on YouTube of the ant gate. And I mean, on the next day, it was sort of a hilarious disagreement between rules officials and Bubba Watson over tunneling animals. And so that was an interesting one in itself.
Do you find having the cameras on the scene affects maybe yourself, or does it affect the players in any way? Or do they play it up a little bit because it's on camera, or just?
Some might. And I think in that case, I think there was a little bit of amateur dramatics going on. Not from my part, because it would have been professional dramatics from me. But now, quite honestly, I remember. It's funny, but I do actually remember that first Open at Troon, and I was with Paul Lawrie, their former Open winner. He'd won 5 years before at the Open, and he on the 18th hole. I mean, the amazing thing at the Open is the infrastructure down like the last hole with all the grandstands, whatever. He carved it right and over the grandstand to the other side of it. And so this is my first Open, but it's quite interesting that you'll know this even at our tournaments, you become sort of zoned in. You're not really aware of anything else because your mind is clicking through the process of how you're dealing with the situation, not with anything else. And he'd hit it over. There was a shipping container there with stuff in it, and his ball was behind it. On the other side, the shipping container was out of bounds, so he was only in bounds by about 2 meters, something like that. But it was then a case of getting TIO relief, and then he was on a path, etc. And the reason I say this one is because it was Paul Lawrie. It's in Scotland, so there's a massive following for him. And we went through the whole thing, and everything went seamlessly. It was fine. But it was only when I sort of finished the ruling, balls in play, and stepped back, I realized sort of that you were engulfed by spectators, and there was sort of boom microphones over your head of listening to what you were actually saying, etc. So no, I think that you go in, you're more concerned about the process and the situation than you are about anything going on around you.
Have you ever had any unfortunate situations with spectators wanting to give you their opinion on the situation?
I have. I have.
And what you do you totally ignore them, or do you just ask them, can you just give me a second?
Yeah, I did tell these people to back off in the end. It was the Perth International at the time. James Niddies was playing in the final. I was refereeing the final. It was the Super Sixes, I think.
Okay.
I was refereeing it, and it was what hole would it be? Maybe the 12th hole at Lake Carignan, and it's the 11th hole, dogleg par 5. I'm sorry, I've got a photographic memory. I can even picture the hole at this point. But he's tugged his drive left, and it's in the rough, close to a tree. And this was before the rule changes, where if your ball's moved, you just place it back where it had been moved from. So he's hit his ball over there. I get up, there's a marshal standing close by, and quite a big crowd. And I get up there, and the marshal tells me, his ball was moved. This kid saw the ball in the grass and just picked it up and moved it. And I said, that's fine. Because I'd got there before the players. I sensed that something had happened. So I'm up there. And this spectator just started telling me how to deal with the ruling. And that in itself was fine. I just ignored that. But then James got up there, and I started to go through the ruling. And obviously, we just had to estimate where it was. And he's going to drop the ball. And the spectator then kept telling, that's not right. That's not right. In the end, I did get frustrated, and I said, look, will you please just let me do the ruling? That's what I'm here for. Just back off out of the way. But in the main, a lot of people think they know the rule, but they don't necessarily know what it is. And 99% of the cases, you don't even hear what they're saying, really.
Because you're so focused in on dealing with the player and the caddy and what have you.
And trying to ascertain. That's the big thing as well, is asking questions and ascertaining all the information so that you can make the best decision possible, really. Yeah. And that was the thing with that one. This kid had just come along, picked it up, and then somebody went, hey, you can't do that, and he just threw it back on the ground.
Right. If I was asked, what's probably the thing I wish I had learnt day one of my rules journey, it was that understanding the rules is not really that difficult at times. It's actually establishing the facts. It's identifying what has happened. I wish someone told me that day one. Establishing the fact is like your greatest challenge as a referee.
Yeah, and going back to the early days at New Zealand Golf, emails, etc., were still pretty new in the 90s. I'll tell you a funny story.
Please.
Nothing to do with refereeing, but so I've joined New Zealand Golf, and I'm a program manager. So basically, I would get jobs to do that weren't in anybody else's portfolio. And the CEO said to me, Scotty, we need a website. And I'm like, what? So you've got to create a website for us. And I'm like, well, I used to look at the PGA Tour website, European Tour at that time, whatever. And so I had none of the skills to build a website. This is 1998 or something like that. I still had one of those Motorola StarTAC phones that used to flip out.
It's really good, yeah.
Inspector Smart or whatever he's called. But anyway, to build this website, we knew this guy who could build them, but I had to tell him what we wanted. So I just got a notebook and went to the PGA Tour website and started drawing what I wanted for each page.
Right.
And so that's how I did it. I created this website by drawing things that I wanted and then passed it on to this guy to actually build it. But yeah, there are funny times. But sorry, the reason I went back to that is at that time, clubs would call you for a ruling, but you wouldn't rush into it. Or they'd write in for a ruling that something had happened at their club champs or whatever, and you actually wrote back to them with a ruling. Now, you could only ever base the ruling on what they told you. So they tell you something, you give a ruling on it, you send it back, and then weeks later, somebody else comes out and says, that's not what happened. Well, really, you can only give rulings on the information that you've got.
Right.
So, and I mean, you can ask as many questions as possible. I mean, sometimes it will still not be the full picture that you get.
Okay.
I mean, bigger tournaments we're lucky because PGA Tour, etc., you've got coverage. It's like we were discussing the other day with that one with the ball going down the drain.
With the left-hander.
I mean, the technology that they've got shot link, they've got cameras on every hole. So
yeah.
It is a bit easier to make decisions. It's probably a little bit harder for us. And I mean, that's something we've always said, even at our organization level. The toughest job is for our guys out there doing pro-ams, because there's only one of them effectively. The bigger your tournament, the more specialized staff you've got. So you can actually just focus on your role when you're at them.
You've said this to me on more than one occasion. You've said when dealing with the players, you said, be friendly to them, but don't be their friend. Can you just expand on that a little bit, please, and why that's important to you?
Yeah, that's my philosophy. Again, we're all out there doing our job. So we're doing our job. So if you're in a work capacity and you are working with somebody in another company or whatever, you're friendly towards them, but you're not going to go for a beer with them afterwards. I just find that yes, I'm friendly with the players because they're human beings. We're just doing our job. So be friendly, be sympathetic at times, but I don't go out for a beer with them, and I don't go out mainly for meals. I don't socialize really with the players. The reason, because it's difficult out there. So suddenly 72nd hole of a tournament and they're in the mix and you've got to give them a ruling that's not favorable, it can sour very, very quickly. So yeah, I mean, sometimes it can be difficult. I mean, some people are friends with players before they go into the role. Right. I mean, I guess I came in as a bit of a foreigner too, in more ways than one, into the mix, and have got to know players very well. I mean, some of the young guys I got to know as young amateurs when they were playing the New Zealand Amateur Championship or whatever, playing in Australian junior teams. So I've known some players since the late 90s. So it's a long time to know these people. You know a lot about them. You know about the family, whatever. But that's just my philosophy, is be friendly with them, but you're not necessarily their friend, because you've got to make tough decisions sometimes. And
that's important. Another story I really enjoyed hearing from you, but not for the players' sake, was, and I remember a situation at Rosebud recently where you were heavily guarding the door into the scoring area, and you told me about a story about a course record being shot. Would you mind sharing why that's so important to you?
Yeah, I mean, I always look on the scoring area as sacrosanct. I got several stories about the recording area and why we do things a certain way, and it's quite topical, obviously, at the moment with new definition for scorecard return being used by tours and the majors now. But I had an unfortunate situation for me, and I felt terrible about it, because it was a young fella that I'd known for a long time through my New Zealand golf background. But at the Vic Open one year, we had a demountable as the scorecard return, and in the morning round, Nick Gillespie played fantastic and shot 64, I believe it was, around the beach course at 13th Beach. And he went into scorecard return, and it was all, he was obviously elated about how he'd played, etc. And the people in the scoring hut were obviously pretty excited about it as well. And for some reason, there happened to be posters for the event or whatever in scorecard return, and they got him to sign the posters. So yes, he's signing posters, whatever. Now, the other thing I think was because of the location. This is going back a number of years now, and for some reason there was no picket fence out the front of the demountable. It was just the demountable. The deemed recording area was the demountable. So once you stepped out of it, that was it. So anyway, I get a call from Langers. He said, I need to see you at the clubhouse. So I get to the clubhouse, and he said, look, I've got a job for you to do, because I think you're the best person to do it, because obviously you know the player. But we've got a difficult situation in that Nick Gillespie's just shot a 64. He's leading the tournament. But in all his excitement and everything else going on in scorecard return, he failed to sign his scorecard. So you're going to have to disqualify him. And I guess these are all great learning experiences to be given these things to do, because you have to do them further down the track anyway. So anyway, I found Nick, he just finished doing a media interview, etc. And Nick, can I have a chat with you? And I said, look, I've got really bad news to give you. With everything that went on in the scorecard return, you actually forgot to sign your scorecard, and there's no way out of this, but we're going to have to disqualify you. And obviously he was absolutely devastated by the whole thing. And I mean, you do learn from these things. So I think that things have improved progressively since that point. I mean, personally, I always love to have a picket fence or something similar around the outside, so it gives you this buffer zone. And so I don't mind this new definition coming in. I didn't like the initial draft, but yeah, I don't mind.
This is a 15 minutes, the grace period.
It's a 15-minute grace period. So, I mean, we always say a tournament should be decided on what the player does out on the course. Right. You don't really... Having to disqualify a player, and I've had to do it a few times, unfortunately, for mishaps in the scorecard return area. But yeah, we've always said it should be decided how they play, not by a technicality like that.
So that 15-minute grace period aside, you've been very, as you said, it's sacrosanct, that scorecard return area. So you've been very protective of who you want in that room, haven't you?
Well, I just don't think there should be any distractions in there. I mean, I know, I mean, I watch the other tours, obviously, because I get asked on what's happened at rulings, etc. DP World Tour always have a camera in scorecard return now, but there's no, from memory and from what I've seen, there's no sound there, so you can see what's going on. And obviously at other events to do this as well. I've suggested that perhaps we could do that with, like with a GoPro type camera in scorecard return. Yeah, people like to see the reaction of the people coming in. What I don't want is people hovering and speaking and looking to drag the player away. I've always been maybe I'm a little bit overprotective in that respect, particularly if a player wins for the first time. If it's a player's first win, you want to make sure they get it right. So check your card, go through everything. And I mean, professional recorders are very good at doing that anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, at some of our events, we will have volunteer scorecards.
Yeah.
And that's when I guess I get a bit protective and make sure that the players do everything right. Check your card.
So that incident at Rosebud really sticks with me. I can still vividly remember you standing there, and there was a member of the media team who wanted to go in and speak to the winner. And in that room at the moment was our staff member and the two players in the last group, maybe three. And one of them had just won. One of them was devastated, having just three-putted the 18th and was in contention. And there was a huge amount of emotion in that room. And here's this media guy wanting to, hey, can I get in there?
Yeah,
and you're going, well, stop. Hang on a second.
Yeah, in their defence, no, they weren't looking to talk to them. That they wanted to make sure they got to the post, or sorry, to do their media requirements before the presentation.
Right.
So there was nothing bad. But the problem we can get at some of these smaller events is you can get people walking in and it's just interrupting things. As I say, to me, it's just sacrosanct. And that was my thing at that one in Rosebud is, as you say, two players in the final group. One is just ecstatic because he just holed a 10 or 12 footer to win the tournament. One on a bit of a comeback trail, I guess you could say, and winning the tournament, basically would have got him through the rest of his playing career, probably in Australia with an exemption there. And obviously devastated. I think he may have three-putted the last hole or something.
I think he did.
To not to go into a playoff. Yeah. I mean, that was a crazy event because I'm standing at the back of the green and I've got I'm a bit OCD sometimes and I'm going through every permutation. And you may remember I'm saying, guys, we need two, possibly three carts. I want three carts there because if this happens, we've got three in it. If this happens, we've got two in it. If this happens, we don't need to go for a playoff. So you've got to sort of everything. When you're sort of tournament director or whatever, you're thinking 3 steps ahead the whole time. You're programming what might happen, what you need to do, etc. And so I remember calling people and saying, "Get your car ready, get the cars down in front. If this happens, we're going." And then it was like, "Wow, what just happened? What just happened?" I mean, Kazuma got up and down out of that right side bunker into that tight back right pin. I don't know who put that there. Well, I do. It was me.
I do.
But a great up and down.
Yeah.
To win
And I reckon, was it 12-foot putt, I reckon?
Oh, yeah. A downhill swinger from left to right from memory. And that was the first of his 3 wins, I think. He won 3 of them.
Yeah.
So...
All right, very good. So some information there. I guess that scorecard return being so, as you said, sacrosanct, and it is not too powerful a word. It is a very important process, part of the process. If this person wants to win, they need to do some things in that scorecard return, and the rules are very clear on that. So
yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. Like on the PGA Tour, I've done a few events up there, and they have staff members that is their job for the PGA Tour. They do the starting and they do the recording of the scores. That's their focus. Wow. They go from tournament to tournament. They have a team and 2 of them go. They do the starting and they do the scorecard return as well. So it's consistency.
And the highest standard, because they're doing that all the time. As I've mentioned, we have a lot of people listening in around the world. A lot are referees. They referee at their state level, national level, amateur, professional, like others are looking to get into the rules a bit more instead, add onto the course. Given all of the things you've done across so many tournaments around the world and all the experience, not just as a referee, but also running tournaments, What advice would you give to that person who says, I'm going to put my hand up, I want to come out onto the course and referee for the first time? When
Yeah.
they approach a player, what sort of advice would you give them? How should they go about that?
One of the first things I'd say, Stu, is this is not a career pathway getting your rules badge. Not in term, I mean, we talk about rules pathways and whatever. In the main, in the vast majority of cases, it's a pathway for going from refereeing club events to state events to elite amateur events, maybe, the Australian Open, whatever. There's not a great pathway after that. There's not a great link between that because there's only so many tours in the world. And it's actually very, very difficult to make that jump. So things have got to be happening, and things that the stars have got to align, really. I mean, as I say, I was very fortunate. I was working in the business anyway. It was my job working in golf and working in rules. And then you do some bigger events through that. And as I say, I was invited, if you like, to come and work for the tour. You don't see many tours advertising for just a rules official. So what we've said is, and you've said, knowing the rules is just one part of it. And I remember talking to Mark Dusbabic from the PGA Tour. And we were chatting one day, and he said, there's a lot of people out there who know the rules a lot better than we do, but what they don't realize is all the other things that we've also got to know.
Yeah.
As part of it. And I mean, I guess the great thing about golf is refereeing is if you don't know the answer, you don't guess. You get on the radio and you ask somebody else. So there's always a backup there. You never guess it. But if they've got an interest in the rules, then helping out at club level is great. I'm not sure of the process now in Australia now that I'm sort of back here in God's zone, but I mean, basically it used to be there was the club level, then there was a state level 2, and I think there's still level 2 courses conducted. And then you have where there used to be a TAR school that was alternated between Australia and New Zealand, so the two work together on them. But there hasn't been one of them, I don't think, since COVID. So there. But it depends what you want to do. If you want to expand your knowledge, then you can keep learning and doing courses and passing exams and that sort of thing. But the main thing is getting out and getting experience at refereeing at tournaments and dealing with situations. I mean, under the old system I set up in New Zealand, level 1 was just all that acknowledged, and it's the same, I think, in Australia. With the R&A level 1, is showing that you've read the rule book. Really, that's what it's got nothing to do with refereeing. It's rules 1 sort of thing. Yeah. It's like going to first year of university for something. You haven't got the experience. You've done 1 year of it. Our level 2, our state or district level, was that you'd pass your exam over 80%, but you then did 3 tournaments shadowing someone, and then you did another 3 tournaments working at it before you got given your state level. And then you came to the national school to get national accreditation. And I was a big fan on these courses, level 3, and it happens still at TARS level, but I used to like a real focus on practical scenarios. So we'd do a day and a half of groups.
Wow.
And it's amazing what you can set up at a golf club. Like, if you're lucky, you're given a facility by a club. Yes, you can use this for the day or a couple of days. But how many practice fairways have got a penalty area there, a red one or a yellow one? You know, if they got practice greens up to a standard that they've got bunkers near them, whatever. So there's lots you can do to create scenarios. I used to buy blue tarpaulins and stake them to the ground, and they were the penalty areas, or water hazards as we call them now. And then just paint red lines, because sometimes creating it gives you the opportunity to address the things that you want to address. So, I mean, how often can you find a golf course that's got a red penalty area so close to the putting green that the player could actually drop on the putting green? Right, yeah. So by just creating it yourself, you can ask those questions. But, you know, it's like, so I hope you got a bit of time, because once I get started, you can tell I do love this subject. But I always remember, like, one of the schools we had in the early days, these people had all done their state qualifications, etc. And I set up this sort of little scenario where I dug a hole behind a tree, like a rabbit hole type thing. And the tree was directly between the hole and the pin.
Yeah, the hole. Okay. Yep.
So I put a ball down there, and then we come up as a group, and you get one of your candidates. So what I used to like to do, and it was baptism by fire, we'd have someone conducting the group or asking the questions, whatever, and I'd get a colleague, or I'd do it myself, to act as the player. Now, why do we do that? Because you got a chance to flare up, and you know what the rule is, and you know what you want to try and achieve. And this is what players will do to you. They'll say, "Oh, but I want to do this," and so it was good setting up those scenarios, because it made the referee focus and think. So anyway, the ball is now in the run of this rabbit hole, if you like, behind the tree. And I said to the guy that was there, the candidate, I want relief from this rabbit hole. And he said, well, you're not entitled to relief. And I said, well, why not? And he said, well, obviously you can't play a stroke because the tree's right there. And I'm like, well, and so we went through the whole thing and argued it and whatever. And no, he was adamant, no relief. And so once we'd done that, I said, okay, look, just tell me, so on a Saturday, your ball is sitting in that situation. Are you right or left-handed? He said, I'm right-handed. I said, so you get up here and that rabbit hole's not there. What are you going to do? So I'm going to chip it over there.
Exactly.
So I said, so he does have a shot then. If that rabbit hole wasn't there, you would hit it there. So there is a shot available to them. He said, yes. I said, so has he got interference for a stroke then? So sometimes they're so caught up in the rule, they're not thinking logically about how to apply what the words actually say.
The conversation I was referring to earlier was at Warrigal, and it was the first time I ever met you, and the first tournament we ever worked together. And you were very generous. We sat over the 4 days, a few times. We just sat there cart by cart for 15 minutes chatting about things. And you specifically said, look, there are people who know so much about the rules and every colon and semicolon and every sentence. But that's not what refereeing is. And I think, it made me realize, look, I think I'd learned that already, but you really hit the point home very hard was, I don't care if it's 16.1 D or E. We just need to know what the process is and how we can tell the player. The most important thing is dealing with that player and how we pass that information on.
That's what can be quite harsh about these rules exams as well. I mean, we all have to do them and whatever. And I mean, our pass mark, if you like, is higher than what the RNE's in a level 3, they'll say that you've passed if you get 60%, I think. But really, 80% is the benchmark to go out refereeing, is to get 80% or more. But I guess from our perspective, we're working in professional golf. And so our guys are sitting these exams where, let's say, maybe 20% of the questions are on handicapping, mixed foursomes,
Yep.
four ball. I mean, for us,
Yep.
I mean, Pete Weldon's doing this at the moment, but I mean, for the President's Cup back in 2019 when I did that, I had to study up on match play because we barely play any match play.
Right.
But I did I quite like the USGA page on quizzes and whatever. I did one recently, and the first 7 questions were on handicapping or foursomes or four ball or whatever. And so it's not something that we deal with day to day. I quite like to test our guys, not test them, but keep them thinking about, sort of rules 1 to 20 more than
right.
Yeah,
rather than beyond that.
They're the important ones. If you're lucky enough to go, if you're doing Warrigal, then obviously you need to know match play as well. But the other key one, I think, the rules are there, but the thing that makes it different for us as well, Stu, and you will have become familiar with this, is how important your local rules are. So it's funny. I had this discussion in a group the other day. It's amazing how many golf clubs want to make it difficult for players. They don't want to give them relief for situations. There's scenarios out there. That's why local rules are written, so that you can introduce them to your club to adapt to different situations. They're not something that would happen at every club.
Right.
But they're there for you to adopt for your club. And I mean, for professional golf, I mean, I don't know how many times I've heard it, people say, oh, you guys play a different game and make it easy for the players, whatever. Yeah, right. I was looking at the scores for the PGA Tour this weekend. This guy Thompson, he was 26 under with 11 holes, 12 holes still to play. These guys are good. So they can play. But as Andrew Langford-Jones always said to me, we're also in the entertainment industry. People want to see great golf. People want to see birdies, eagles. They want to see long drives, unless they're sadistic and they want to see players, and I used to always think that was the case at the US Open. I mean, I've done a couple of US Opens. I did the 2010 at Pebble Beach, and like some of it just didn't really make sense to me. Like that, I always remember the first hole at Pebble Beach. There's a creek across down past drive lane, but there's a bunker just at the front right of the green, and the way they were doing course setup at that time, there was jungle rough around the outside lip of the bunker. Now, it was maybe 2-3 feet wide. So you could miss the green by 6 feet and be unplayable, but miss it by 10 feet and you're in a bunker that you can play a shot out of. Get up and down from. That was a bit tough. I mean, I was with one of the rounds, I was with Lee Westwood, and on the 18th hole, that sort of feature hole of Pebble Beach.
The tree and the beach.
Yeah, he went in the bunker on the right-hand side, and he was in the bunker, but the grass was so long outside that he'd gone sort of run through, so he's on the right-hand edge of the bunker. But the grass was so long outside the bunker, it was like an old man's comb over, that his ball was under this grass that had folded over. He's in a bunker. He's had to take an unplayable because he can't get club on ball in the bunker because there was so much grass hanging into it. So Yeah,
Wow.
they play it tough. I mean, as you'll see in the next couple of weeks, I have to say I am a big fan of links golf. That's how I grew up playing golf, and I think they say it's golf in its purest form. It's just there's so many unknowns on a links golf course, and I was there when Tiger won at Royal Liverpool, and the course was brown. It was just a classic summer links course where the only green parts were in the bellies of the swales on the fairway. I don't think he didn't use a driver all week. And when he won there,
I remember, he actually, didn't use driver once. I remember that.
And I mean, 2 years ago at St Andrews, it was like they put a steamroller over the fairways. The fairways were so hard, and they stimp faster than the greens do.
Wow.
So,
I remember Jeff Ogilvy won the US Open at like +5 was his winning score from memory.
Yeah. Michael
ago,
Campbell won it the year before, maybe 2004. I think it might have been then. Jeff was what, 2005?
5 or 6, one of them.
Yeah, something like that. It's a different kind of setup there.
Could we just finish off with just talking specifically a little bit about rules? Do you have a favourite? Is there something you would like to introduce to the game as a rule? Maybe change an existing rule? Is there something that bugs you a little bit?
Yeah, and a good friend of ours was involved in a ruling up in, was it Macau or last year up in Asia? Blakey.
Yeah, is this
Yeah, I mean, I've since had a bit of dialogue with the RNA. I think that there could be more guidance given to a rules official. Now, I'm not saying whether that decision that was made was right or wrong, because you have to be there to know what was said, what was done, etc. But I can understand the sentiments of the players, the other players in the group, saying, how can he do that? How can he basically clear a path for his club there? So there's nothing that was done in that respect. I think the biggest issue there was the time taken, 15 minutes to make a ruling when, the players got 5 minutes or they've got undue delay. But what I would quite like is more guidance on what can be done and can't be done with a loose impediment affecting the cats, conditions affecting the strokes. But when it's crazy because there's an interpretation for when your ball is in a bunker. Okay, so your ball's in a bunker. You have got an acorn behind your ball. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, you can move that acorn and lift it out the way, and that's fine. But if you drag that acorn to the side and remove the sand behind the ball, then you're affecting cats. You get penalised. Now, why is it that there's an interpretation specifically for that, but there isn't one saying what you can and can't do? Because the whole concept of the acorn in the bunker is removing it in the least obtrusive way. Now, yes, it would take some wordsmithing, etc., but there could be an interpretation that says, so that when you come up to a player and he's got a lot of gunk behind his ball or her ball, and he says, what can I do? There should be guidance in there saying, well, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, but you can't do this, this, or this. Okay, because there's a lot of difference. Let's say that there's a hefty branch sitting behind the ball and it's got stuff wrapped around it. You drag that away from behind the ball, you're clearing the path. You lift it out the area and effectively you're removing that, but you're not having as big an impact on the vegetation around it. So I think there could be greater clarification given on what you can and can't do. And it may be difficult to word, but I do think there should be a discussion on it.
And what you say is that, you know, two different referees could arrive on the same scene and have very different views about, yes, you can and no, you can't. And the other referee says the opposite, because it can be quite subjective in that sense.
And I don't know if you've come across this. I mean, I haven't heard it at any events we've worked together, but it happened to me certainly in the early days. What the players want is consistency. Why is it so difficult to get a job with a tour? It's because they have a specific team. Now, they may have 8, 10 rules officials, and on the PGA Tour, of course, they're working PGA Tour, Corn Ferry Tour, Champions, whatever. On the DP World Tour, they're doing the main tour, they're doing the Challenge Tour, they're doing the Seniors Tour there as well. But the reason that you keep a smaller team is consistency, because the players then know they're going to get the same ruling every week. And I mean, that goes into everything else as well. So it's with the rules, but it's also with things like setup. So with setup, if you're working with, I always remember, I went to Australia 2010. I'd only been there 2 weeks and went to the Volvo China Open, which was, the One Asia was around at that time. We were part of One Asia, so Langers went up as our TD, I went up as our chief rules official, whatever. But it's the first time I'd done setup with the European Tour. I'd worked events with the European Tour at Scottish Open before, but I was doing 1-9, and Matt Slanner was doing setup on the other 9. And I can't remember how many times I went and looked at his pins, I looked at my pins, and it wasn't that I was really doubting myself. It was more, well, how bad would it be if the players came in and said, well, that 9 was just so totally different from that 9. So it's consistency in your setup. And so, I mean, that's the same even with our team. If somebody's not sure about a pin or whatever, they'll get on the radio to, can you come and have a look at this pin on such and such, and just see if you're comfortable with it, how I've set it up or whatever there.
Right. And I think that's something for me personally, what I've learned over the last 12 months, not with setup, but actually getting on the radio, even though I am 98% sure I know the rule. But you know what? Why don't I just get 2% more and make sure that Heath or Weldo or someone else on the other 9 hasn't done something different, and we've, again, for that consistency, I think that's so important for the players.
Not so much the general rules. I mean, you know the rule book better than I do. But given an example, that first tournament at Warragul as well, when you called me in for a second opinion.
Yes. Because
on 2 occasions, there was 2 occasions, you might remember it. I'm glad I'm not like Biden. I can actually remember these situations.
Ouch.
But anyway, I remember the 2 situations. One was the local rule regarding sods or freshly laid
seems to cut turf or something. Yep.
All right. And the query was, so there was freshly laid turf, or there was turf there, but there was a real bare piece of ground just to the edge of it, and you weren't sure whether to give relief for that abnormal course condition, if you like, or not. And I explained to the player, yeah, I'll give you relief. And we spoke afterwards, and we would deem that to be part of the newly laid turf, because because it's clearly where the turf is, and it just hasn't healed, and it was just a bad job of doing the turf there. I think the second situation that arose was there a rabbit scrape or something
under a tree, in the base of a tree.
Did the player have a
there was lots of holes around. Yeah.
So it's more how we deal with those situations generally than anything else. So that's just what you become familiar with that over the time.
And yeah, and the consistency. And even when a previous chat, I asked Nick Ahern about when he played a lot on the PGA too. I said, was it good for you to see the same faces coming to you all the time? And he said, yes. There was
Yes,
comfort.
that was what I was going to say to you right from the start. It happened to me.
Yeah.
And sometimes people get offended by this, but a player will say, can I get one of the tour staff to come? So if it's a guest referee that's that's refereeing, then they may, because they want consistency. That it won't be that the wrong ruling's been given or whatever, but they just want that familiarity and consistency with it more than anything else.
No, it's a very good point. I believe that. I believe that would happen, 100%. That they go, oh, look, can I just talk to? I know he's just over there. Can I speak to him instead?
I remember there was one player that had played a long time on PGA Tour and came back to Australia and was playing in our tournaments, and very, very focused on the golf course, just like very focused, and probably misunderstood because of that. He came across in a different way, and it's because he was focused on what he was doing. And I got to know him off the course by talking to him or whatever there, and I sort of knew that I'd become accepted at a tournament because I got a call on the radio from a local state body official saying, I got a player down here at such and such green, and he says he won't take a ruling from anybody but Graeme Scott. Can you come and do this ruling?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did laugh. But it's funny, the other thing in that story was it was at Newcastle Golf Club, and it was New South Wales Open, and it followed the Australian Open. The week before, Peter O'Malley was in the final group playing with Tiger Woods. Pom was playing great golf at that time. He's playing with Tiger, and there are thousands following them. We've played the following week, the New South Wales Open at Newcastle, and it was an odd number cut. And Pom was the last player to make the cut, and he was in a one ball. He was in a one ball with nobody watching.
No crowd.
off the 10th tee. I'm pretty sure he was playing a one ball at that. I mean, we never play a one ball now, but or it might have been a one tee start. But I just thought that's golf for you. 1 week,
right? What a difference.
Right at the top, and then the following week you're back down the bottom again.
I guess it doesn't take professional golfers too long to realise that's what golf can be like for them, and that's what their journey can be like sometimes. Scotty, well, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. As I've said for years, your experience and knowledge, and it's just, how do you teach this stuff? So for us, how do we learn this stuff? Because we don't read it in the rule book, and it's only by going out there on course, going to tournaments, watching you, listening to you, and learning from guys like yourself with as much experience as you have, which is how we learn this stuff. So I look forward to doing some more learning and learning more from you with our upcoming tour season when that starts in a few months. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
No, I've really enjoyed it, Stu. And as you can tell, I do love talking about golf and what we do. I've been extremely fortunate, I have to say, very, very fortunate. But sometimes if opportunities come along, you just got to grab them by the horns and go for it. And really, that's what I've done. Is things have come along, I tend not to say no. I say yes. Let's give it a crack and see how we go.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you very much for your time. It's been great to have you.
Cool. Thanks, Stuart.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that chat with Scotty. How good was that? Just an incredible amount of experience. I'm almost ashamed to admit that when I pressed stopped on that recording, we chatted for another 20 minutes and we kept going, and he kept talking about different stories and experiences he has had, which were just terrific to listen to. But I'm sure you enjoyed what he had to say in that chat. Just a man, as I said, with an incredible amount of experience and so much to share for people like ourselves who are interested in, we're working at professional tournaments or amateur tournaments and dealing with players. So just terrific. And thank you again to Scotty for the time he took to have that chat with us. Well, of course, we need to finish this episode with the GRQOTW for episode 120, and it is as follows. Andy, the average golfer, is playing a stroke round at Wombat Hills. On the 17th hole, Andy plays his tee shot way left, and after a brief search, he finds his ball. However, it is right next to the stone-carved wombat statue, which the committee has deemed an integral object. The statue interferes with his area of intended swing, so after advising Danny, the D-grade golfer, his marker, that he will take free relief, he identifies his nearest point of complete relief and drops another ball into a 1 club length relief area. Stuart walks over and tells Andy that the statue is an integral object and there is no free relief, so he must correct the mistake. Accordingly, Andy properly identifies a 2 club length relief area from the original ball, which has not been moved, in order to take unplayable ball relief. He realises the drop ball is within the unplayable ball relief area. He then plays the drop ball, which lands on the green. He takes 3 putts to hole out and reports a score of 6 to Danny, 5 strokes and 1 penalty stroke for the unplayable. Before submitting his scorecard, Andy, the average golfer, asks you, as a member of the committee, to confirm his score for the 17th hole. What is Andy, the average golfer's score for the 17th hole? Well, thanks again for listening in to episode 120 of the Golf Rules Questions podcast. Hope you enjoyed that, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.